I want you to imagine for a second that you're a financial auditor and you have two cases that you're working on, which means that you're responsible for meticulously scanning through the bookkeeping and accounting for these two different companies. So you look at the first company and you find they're doing a good job. They're running a tight ship. They're doing their payrolls on time. They're keeping accurate accounting of their income and their expenses, and they employ qualified professional accountants whose practices and methodologies are easy for you to follow. With the second company, you find that nothing makes sense at all. None of the payroll has been done. The income and expenses aren't accounted for at all, and all of their documentation is in complete disarray and chaos. So you decide to look into this a little bit further, and you discover that the CEO of this company, he's gone kind of crazy, and he put his 2-year-old grandson in charge of bookkeeping and accounting, who obviously spent that time not doing bookkeeping and accounting, but throwing paper all over the place and decorating the office wall with the general ledger stamp. Now let me ask you, upon discovering this, would you proceed with your audit of the second company? Would you look at it and say, well, I know he's only 2 years old, but I still have to try and make sense of his method and to discover if there's anything that's been done right here? Or would you look at it and say, there's nothing reasonable to be discovered here, and then close the case on it? The only reason to proceed with an audit or an inquiry like this is to discern what management practices were employed by those who have rational methods for bookkeeping and accounting, and then to try to discern whether or not they stayed within the boundaries of good practices and ethics or if they strayed far away from them. That process assumes, before you ever get started, that you are going to be examining the work of intelligent minds, with the purpose of discerning if those intelligent minds use the resource of their minds in the service of acceptable accounting practices or deceptive ones. What you wouldn't do is proceed with an inquiry like this if you knew there was no intelligibility to be discerned from it. If you knew for sure that a 2-year-old had taken over the accounting responsibilities of a company, your audit would end right there because there would be no point in proceeding. So what can we gain from this clumsy analogy? Well, it should help us appreciate that rational inquiry should only ever be applied to something that is assumed to be intelligible. When we use our reason to try to understand something, we are assuming from the outset that the thing we are investigating can be understood by reason because it is reasonable and because it will reveal itself to us in a rational way. That behind the mystery of the thing, we will discover that there is order and governance to it. But if you knew that the thing that you were trying to investigate was composed entirely of meaninglessness and chaos, you would never bother investing the resources that it takes to try to understand it. Like if one day you looked at it and it was blue and of a certain weight and size and composed of certain properties and behaving in a certain way, and then the next day you look at it, it's hot pink and composed of a completely random different assortment of properties, you look at that and say, this thing is just chaos. There's no point in trying to apply my reason to it. So what does this have to do with science? Well, science is a method of rational inquiry into the natural universe or the natural world, and it assumes, again from the outset, that the natural world or the natural universe is governed by order and intelligibility. So science seeks to audit it and to understand that order. It assumes that human reason is compatible with and can be applied to the natural universe in the same way that we assume and recognize that our reason can be applied to accounting records or to something like a machine. A machine is governed and ordered according to certain ideas and principles. It is designed by an intelligence and therefore is intelligible. If the universe is not designed by an intelligence, then it follows that it would not be intelligible. Our classical and medieval European ancestors, they understood this well. They first assumed that the universe is designed by an intelligence, and therefore the work of trying to discover its ordering would not be a waste of their time. European theists were obsessed with unraveling the rational mysteries of the natural universe, which is why they invested a huge amount of resources into academic training and research, which yielded what we now recognize as the scientific method. Most other societies, when they looked at the natural world, they detected chaos, which is why they weren't preoccupied with that same kind of inquiry. One day they would look outside and it would be rainy and cold. The next day, randomly, it would be warm. They would look up in the night sky sometimes and they would see the moon in a particular shape and the stars, and then the next day they look up and they would see nothing. One day the plants and animals would behave a certain way, and then the next day or season they'd do something different. This appeared to them like the temperamental traits of a personality who was suffering from chaotic mood swings. And so from that, they assumed and concluded that the natural world was something like a person, and this became known as pantheism, which was embraced by almost all primitive cultures. Monotheists like Jews, Christians, and Muslims believed that the world was created by a supreme rational mind who imbued it with rationality such that it could be relied upon to behave in an ordered and governed way, even if it didn't give the appearance of being so at first glance. It just meant that you had to deepen your inquiry to discover that ordered nature behind it all. We've since inherited and we take for granted those assumptions and those axioms and all the great achievements of the founders of modern science who were to a person monotheists. People like Thales, Aristotle, Albertus Magnus, Nicholas Copernicus, Roger Bacon, Isaac Newton, and Rene Descartes. And now we take it for granted that science is valid, while forgetting and neglecting all of those first principles and assumptions that had to be established. And because we've forgotten them, we trick ourselves into thinking that we can carry on doing science while neglecting the fact that we have to concede that there is an intelligence behind the ordering of the natural universe. When we encounter some phenomenon, it's common to ask, why is that the way it is? For example, why is it that the northern sky bursts into a light show sometimes? Or why is it that the universe is filled with matter rather than antimatter? And the more we follow through with that instinct, the more we will start to arrive at the more fundamental questions, which is, why is there a universe at all? And we don't look at questions like that as if they're a nonsensical arrangement of words. They immediately resonate with anybody who has an inquisitive mind as valid in their inception. It's not like if somebody said something like, when did purple stop smelling like thunder? You would immediately dismiss a question like that as a meaningless arrangement of words. But if someone were to ask, why is the sky blue? Even if we don't know the answer, we assume that it's a reasonable question to which there is a reasonable answer. And why do we do that? Because we assume there is a reason, and you can't inject reason into any explanation without conceding that someone gave it a reason. Reason can only be attributed to an intellect or a will. It cannot be traced back to random, chaotic, or irrational processes. Whether we admit this fact or turn a blind eye to it like too many people in the scientific fields do today, reason applied to natural phenomena instinctively presupposes an intelligence behind those phenomena. So if we're going to continue asking and validating those kinds of questions and doing scientific inquiry, we should stop pretending that reason and intelligibility found throughout the natural universe aren't preceded by an intelligent mind. And if we refuse to do so, it shouldn't surprise us that the more hostile we are towards the idea of an intelligence behind the laws of the natural universe, that the more scientific truth will be marginalized by ideological assumptions, superstitions, and assertions, and we're already seeing an alarming amount of that in our contemporary political discourse. Hey, thanks for watching that. If you enjoyed it, then be sure to like and subscribe for more. And if you want to support the making of content like this, then please consider joining my online community, The Reinforcements. It's kind of like Patreon, but instead of being beholden to a big tech company, it's a website I built entirely myself, so there's no risk of us being censored or shut down or anything like that. There are hundreds of people who have already signed up, and our mission is to renew and reinforce the church. So if that's you, then come check it out. As an added bonus for certain tiers, I will also send you a gift box from Glory and Shine, which is a Catholic, family-owned and operated company. They make bath and body products. They're actually their beard balm I'm supporting, or I'm sporting right now. I'm not just a spokesperson, I'm actually a customer. So even if you don't join the Reinforcements, maybe check them out anyways. Glory and Shine, they're an amazing company.